Hello and how's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here, and today I am honored to be interviewing the legendary Ted Peterson. He's one of the founders of the Elder Scrolls universe and has worked as a designer for the Elder Scrolls Arena and lead designer for Daggerfall as well. And he was also a writer for both Morrowind and Oblivion as well, and he has written several of the in-game books, totaling over 150,000 words within these books, which is kind of crazy to think about. That's a lot of writing. And he is currently the design director of a new studio, OnceLost Games, who are working on quite an exciting and ambitious RPG called Wayward Realms. We'll be talking a bit about his time in the industry, his time working on the Elder Scrolls franchise, and most importantly, the Wayward Realms as well. Hello, Ted. How is it going?
I'm doing well. Hope you are.
I'm doing well, too. We had to overcome some technical difficulties, but we are finally here. Super glad you're here, and yeah, I figured the best place to get started in this interview, like any great RPG adventure, is the very beginning of your journey in the gaming industry. So how did you get started making games?
It's I guess my short version of the story is that after college, I didn't know what to do. I had an English major. I had written a couple short stories, and I moved. I was in North Carolina. I'm actually back in North Carolina, but I moved up to Washington D.C. because that was the closest big town to where I was living. And back in those days, early '90s, you didn't go online to look for jobs. You pulled out the newspaper and went to the classified ads. And after I'd gone through a bunch of different choices of, things that someone with an English degree could get, where it's usually being a writer for some, focus group or a political group. There was one at the very end that said, I think it was literally two lines in the Washington Post in the classified ads where it said, wanted writer of science fiction and fantasy, P.O. Box, blah, 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 Rockville, Maryland. And I thought it was a joke. First of all, it was two lines, so it was the cheapest ad you could possibly run. So I figured it was like some kid in his basement who was doing comic books and liked to draw and wanted somebody to, write. So I did all the serious job applications, and then I finally wrote a joke letter to them where I said, Dear P.O., because they didn't list the name of the company. And I said, Dear P.O., I don't think that writing science fiction fantasy is the way to fame and fortune. But against my better judgment, I am including my resume and some of the writing I've done. That pretty much says everything you need to know, except I'm a recent college graduate, perfectly normal in every way, except when the full moon comes out, I grow a third eye and butterfly wings. And they, because it takes a day to mail, so they called me back 2 days later and said, come on in for an interview. And that was VJ and Julian.
Oh, wow. I wonder if they liked the third eye or the butterfly wings. Which one was their preference?
Julian swears that he doesn't remember that letter. But they did give me some tests. So there was a Bethesda at the time had been around for a couple of years. They were best known. They had done some Wayne. They got the rights to Wayne Gretzky, so they were doing Wayne Gretzky hockey and Hockey League Simulator, and they kind of gotten into the hockey game. They had done at least one football game, and they had two Terminator games. They'd gotten the right to the first Terminator movie, but not the second. So we could do anything we wanted within the Terminator world as long as we pretended that Terminator 2 and down the line didn't exist. So they had done a plain old Terminator game, which didn't do very well. And then they did a Terminator game called Terminator 2029. And that was I think at the time we called it a 2.5D game, where everything was at 90-degree angles. So you press, I think probably the up and down arrow to move one step at a time, press the right arrow to turn right, but everything was, it was 3D. Mm-hmm. And that had done pretty well. And they were looking to expand on it and create add-on packs for it. So my first thing on that, so they said we have an amazing tool to create levels. We think any monkey could create a great level in this. This is long before like sort of level design became a thing that people studied in college and took seriously. But we need to have a story, and our characters need to give you basically mission briefings before each one. So we really need a writer. So I was really brought on to be a writer, and then gradually worked to be a junior designer and so forth.
Wow, that's interesting that you put specifically in your wording that you don't think being a writer for fiction and sci-fi or for fantasy and sci-fi is the way to fame and fortune. Yet here you are.
Aside from the fame and fortune, but
right, right. Well, I mean, you're low-key famous a little bit. But that's interesting. You mentioned Terminator games. I remember being a kid in the '90s. I rented a Terminator game. I think for maybe it was a Super Nintendo or maybe the Sega, because I had a Sega CD too, and it was a side scroller, and you started the game as a naked Terminator, and I remember punching my way through the bars. I wonder if that's one of those games, and I never knew it, but I actually played one of Bethesda's early games. It's kind of interesting.
I don't remember us doing a side scroller Terminator game, but
okay.
The license was divvied up among, so there'd be somebody who got the Terminator license and somebody got the Terminator 2 license, and so they figured out a way to. There are licensing experts who figure out how to divide things across the world. So
I heard it was easier back then too to get big license deals like that for like Terminator or like other movies like that than it is now, to where if you want to get a license deal for something big now in gaming, it would cost you an arm and a leg probably to do so. So that's
I've been to those conventions where they have all the franchises that the obvious franchises, Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever, and then they have, well, this is a movie that's going to be coming out shortly that we expect big things from, and so you're kind of gambling on, oh, okay, well, that's going to be that's going to be a big thing, or but if you make an amazing game but the movie is a big flop, then you're screwed. So
right.
So there's a lot of trying to figure it out, but obviously they always also. It's rolling the dice on, okay, well, a game is going to be, if you just do a great action game and you add the Terminator license onto it, then you're going to attract some more eyes than, than you would ordinarily. But, it still is just being a little conservative with saying, okay, well, we can't do that. And at the time we started with the Elder Scrolls, I mean, we would have liked to have gotten the Dungeons and Dragons license, or some other license to sort of give us some eyes on the project before we started on it.
That's interesting. Definitely makes sense. In terms of Elder Scrolls, since you mentioned Elder Scrolls, what was like the original creation of the Elder Scrolls universe like? What was that legendary moment in gaming history? I'm sure it was influenced, like you said, by Dungeons and Dragons, because I'm assuming you probably have played that before you got into actually doing all that. So yeah, how did that moment in time go?
Well, when we were talking about when I first got the job at Bethesda, they not only gave me a rating test, but they also gave me, because Julian and VJ had already been kicking around the idea of the Elder Scrolls, although it wasn't called it that. But they wanted to have someone on. I was hired on to do the Terminator game originally, but they were thinking, well, if we're going to keep you on, then we want you to work on this fantasy role-playing game, and we want to get someone on who knows what that's all about. So there were things like you had to, I was given a multiple choice question, quiz, and there'd be things like, do you know what THACO stands for? To hit armor class 0, and all these rules that were fairly. I mean, I think that they were across the board, but Dungeons and Dragons-y in description, and the game was really. I wouldn't say an action game, but it was a game that was supposed to be set in. It was called Arena because you were supposed to be fighting in these arenas. So it was an action game. And so my assignment was to write a short story that was set in an arena where a team was fighting to get to the center of this kind of labyrinth, and then get the prize, and that was the end of the story. And so I, of course, had to have the various twists. The characters having their interactions. I remember the big thing was that Julian did not care for my boss monster at the end, which I think was a giant albino walrus.
Oh yes, that is awesome.
So I still think I think walruses are really freaky looking, but I can kind of get where when you get to the final page and that's what you're facing, you're like, all right.
That's hilarious. That's funny because, like, for some reason, I had an infatuation with just thinking walruses were funny, like, throughout my whole life. So I always had inside jokes with games about walruses. And I remember we used to play Civilization 2 back in the day, and I actually altered all the little bitmaps or the art file assets to be walruses. So all my units would be this walrus army just invading your empire and destroying everything.
Sure, I mean they're fat. They have tusks. I mean it's a strange thing that's going on with them. So
and they're very king-like. They just lazy around all day. It's hilarious. So working on Arena, what was one of the first steps you took on a game of that size? Because even back then, I mean, like you said, it was supposed to be set in an arena, but obviously as you started to build a game, it started to be well beyond that into a larger world. What was the point in the game's development process to where you were like, you know what, we can take this outside of these dungeons, outside of these arenas, and actually make a full-fledged fantasy world where the player can run around and explore and do quests?
Right. Well, it was always the plan that it was a very linear progression. That I mean, like most action games, that you go level 1, level 2, level 3. So you're going through a series of dungeons, and when we call them dungeons, they really varied. So some things were technically dungeons in that they were created in the dungeon editor, but they might have been an outdoor forest, but it was sort of created with 3D hedges that were forming the corridors as if they were a dungeon, but it would have a different, a different look to it. But the plan was always that as you were going through, and if speaking to the people who've never played Arena, it's a 30-year-old game. The storyline was also not particularly original. It was the classic gather all the pieces, and then at the end you have this mega weapon which you can use to kill the giant wizard at the end. And each one of these pieces is located in a different dungeon. But the dungeons, obviously progressed in difficulty. So in between your dungeon adventures, you needed to spend some time training and gaining equipment and doing all of that. And in those, you went to a city and you got a quest. And those were these generated quests that I was writing. And we kind of figured out how to do we were doing because we figured out how to do some procedural generation for the dungeons, and then we kind of figured out how to do, and I really think procedural generation is the right word to describe the quests, especially in Arena. I think it got a little better in Daggerfall, but there was a sense that I could create one quest and it could be used infinitely, and we just substitute in I'm King X, I need you to kill Y, and I will give you Z, gold, and those would be programmatically created. Insert. Okay, well, this guy's a level 3 guy, so you need to kill a goblin, but this guy is a level 12 guy, and you need to kill a minotaur, or whatever. However that worked out, and we did have some testers on who were playing a bunch of them and saying these are pretty fun, and the work on the Arena battling aspect of it was taking a long time and not getting great reviews. So as the testers were playing more and more and saying okay, well, this aspect of it is fun, this other aspect of it is not so fun, we just completely pivoted and said, okay, it's a role-playing game. But we already had a lot of the things that would make a role-playing game. It was always kind of an action role-playing game that still chose a race and chose a class. I don't think you created class in Arena, but you could tweak some aspects of it. So we knew that advancing your character was an important part of the game, and having some classes and whatnot was always kind of part of the plan. We just, put the foot more down on a lot of things.
That's interesting. So that kind of dynamic with where you said like person X gives you quest to find item Y and you get whatever Z reward, that's still used a lot in gaming now, especially in terms of procedural generation. Do you think that maybe you actually helped put that kind of dynamic into motion? Because it seems like it's a staple of the RPG genre, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were some games that did some version of it before. I mean, I can think of a couple games that I was playing at the time that that was the angle, but we did it bigger than most people. And technically, I mean, you could say that Arena was the biggest game ever. It actually, as far as the landscape goes, was procedurally generated in the way that I think some people think procedural generation is, which is you walk south and the land builds in front of you and it goes on forever, and it just is random trees and random buildings and stuff like that, and you can't really walk from A to Z because there's no physical connection between these places, but the code will create this landscape, and kind of same thing with the quests. So there's a part with Arena that I think we did okay, and then in Daggerfall we did some things better, where we're recognizing that there needs to be some connection. It feels more real if the world is really connected, and then when it comes to the quests, having a more interesting storyline and having things that develop, that it isn't always. I don't think we had a reputation system in Arena where like a king would, for some reason, not want to give you a quest, or give you a trap quest, or in some way. We did create a lot of the early factions in that they were all enemies. I think all the ones that the Underking, the Blades. There were a number of kind of groups that were created that were. I think it was, the quest would be, go to, this dungeon, kill this creature, I'll give you this gold. But by the way, the fill in the blank faction is going to try to stop you. And then we would say, all right, well, if it's this group of people, then they're going to, if it's a Blades, it's going to be a bunch of warrior types who are going to try to stop you along the way. But that was sort of as far as the lore goes, all it was.
Huh. Well, that's interesting, because now thinking back about where it was and how it came to where it is now, it's still somewhat built on those same foundations. RPGs, while they progress technologically, they progress on a technological level. A lot of the elements from the foundations from the very early days are still very much relevant. And speaking of the early days, while you were working on Arena and Daggerfall, did you ever foresee Elder Scrolls as being like as huge as it is today? I know it's kind of went off on its own thing, but I mean, just in retrospect.
No, I mean, the joke was that at the time we were doing it, we were good friends with the people at Surtech who were doing wizardry, and we were saying, oh yeah, because again, we're doing it because we love it. Like, so like that. I guess I didn't really say that at the beginning, but we are big role playing Dungeons and Dragons, and computer game sword and sorcery fans. And we told them that we were working on that, and they just thought it was hilarious that like we thought that we could just like come out of nowhere and start this, working on this. So again, Arena was really an action RPG. So we thought that, well, if we lean in on there's going to be a lot of sword fighting, then it doesn't have to be great in other role playing aspects. And then we realized that the action was not going to be that great. We kind of had to lead in other role-playing aspects, and we kind of won the respect. So I think that the beginning stages, Arena did not sell particularly well, but it sold pretty well for Bethesda, which was really a mom and pop shop at the time, and well enough that they said, okay, well, we'll say you can work on a sequel. So it is definitely a modest beginning, and obviously is built up. I worked on really as a consultant on some of the later Elder Scrolls games after it had really kind of exploded. And I'll say, I mean, we certainly did a lot of foundational stuff on the series, and the lore and how the games work and how nonlinear it is, and those type of things that are we always have been, at least better or for worse, aimed at in the titles. But getting it on consoles certainly made it really explode.
Yeah, Morrowind is usually the game that a lot of people remember, or Oblivion, or so on. It's just depending on the generation. Personally, I started with Morrowind because one of my friends had an Xbox, so I would go over there and play it with them. And then I didn't have a good computer at the time, so I got Daggerfall, which was able to run on my computer. And I don't know how many hours I lost. I think every time I played an Elder Scrolls game for the first time, it kept me up the entire night. Basically. Oh no, it's fine. I appreciate it. But you mentioned that Arena was an action RPG, and then you put so much focus on the RPG elements that Daggerfall is now still to this day known as one of the main epochs of just RPG gaming elements, and that I think that's a pretty great leap from where Arena was going to Daggerfall. And as you take these leaps from one sequel to another, and as technology increases, and from your point of view, what was one of the more exciting things that you thought you can now implement into the Elder Scrolls, or something that you can change, or a new gameplay mechanic that this new technology back then actually would open up doors for you to do?
Well, there's a little bit of backstory on that. So in between Arena and Daggerfall, I made another Terminator game, and as we were doing it, they were refining the engine. So we were, like I said, it was kind of Arena was a 3D game in a sense, but it was very very limited in what we could pull off on that. And then during the course of doing this second, I guess third Bethesda second my Terminator game, they started developing things that on the surface seemed like super simple and not at all 30 years later super exciting technology. But for example, we could go from every wall having the same height to walls having half the height, or we could set whatever we wanted to. So what that meant was, in the world of Terminator, for example, you could create a couch, because you could create something that is a series of blocks that would look like a couch in 3D, and you'd walk around it. So while we were creating the Terminator game, that technology was being created. So Terminator was, again, a linear thing of you going through first through last level. And as I'm designing it, there were only three of us working on it. It was me, a programmer, and an artist. And we, the engine got to the point where we could do this. So actually, if you play through it, you could actually watch the engine develop, because the first level, the couches were 2D sprites. So if you walked around the couch, it would rotate in whatever direction, because it was just a 2D image. But by the time you got to level 10, a couch was a 3D object that you could walk all the way around. And we didn't have the time to go back and fix the stuff we had done in the previous one. So it's this sort of surreal world in which suddenly 3D emerges and as we're playing it. So we knew that we had the ability to do, from the technology point of view, that we could make the world bigger. Julian spent a lot of time, like I said, it's procedural generation in Arena in the maybe purest sense, in that it's that roguelike. You move forward, you get quests. The quests are randomly generated. The terrain is randomly generated. This can go on for infinity. In Daggerfall, there is a limited. We didn't have the word sandbox in those days, but it was a sandbox environment, but it was procedurally generated in the sense that I painted the landscape, I think probably using MS Paint, and and said, okay, well, there are mountains over here, and here's some villages, and then each village was created in a template, but then some of those pieces were randomly moved around so that they would have different pathways to get to this, so it might feel a little bit different. So I think a lot of the stuff we did, there were definitely some technological advances. There were a lot of tool advances, just saying like, okay, well, this is now what we realize what we want to do. I really wanted to, like I said, in Arena, the storyline was just this cliched, linear, go kill the evil wizard at the end type of world. So I just wanted to turn it to 11 to make a super complicated, politically, these people are fighting against these people, and there's a bunch of different storylines going on, and we even had like I think 6 different endings or something like that in Daggerfall. So I think we wanted to do, it's kind of a cliche of the sequel that you want to turn everything up to 11.
Right. No, Daggerfall, I would say, definitely did that, especially with the lore, the writing, everything. I mean, the Dragon Break element is such a unique thing that people still to this day are talking about. Was this a Dragon Break? Was this a in terms of what could be going on next in the storyline? That's very interesting. That's funny that you said that one of your games, a Terminator game, that you're walking around and you actually see technology progress from the eyes of the character, like they're waking up to be more sentient or something.
Well, I'll tell you the first part, and this wasn't actually in that first or the second Terminator game. It was in my first Terminator game. And this doesn't really say great things about Bethesda, who have been known, rightly so, for their bugs over the years. But we were doing for some reason, we realized that from time to time, Terminators would attack you through walls, or just like emerge through a wall and attack you.
No.
And we were, but it's one of those bugs that you just go like, all right, put more testers on it. Let's figure out when this happens, like what are the elements, because you can't just say this bad thing happens and fix it to a programmer. You have to say when A, B, and C happen, then D happens, and it shouldn't happen. And then they can go in and fix it. But otherwise, it's not really a useful bug report. So we had people working on this. But at the time, because this is obviously before, like nowadays, you just like, okay, well, this game is done, upload it, and it's published. But at the time, there was a certain amount of time that would take to publish a manual that went with the game, to do the box art, and it didn't take very much time to duplicate the floppy disks that came with the game. That was kind of a lot. So you could really work on those bugs up until the end, but you had to do all, so we're leading up to that. And I was working on the manual for my first Terminator game, and because we hadn't fixed that bug, I just added into the manual. Skynet is working on this new technology which sometimes allows Terminators to phase through walls, and then they said, now that you've called a bug a feature, you are
Yes.
I know, my friend.
I was just about to pull out that meme. It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Exactly. No. It was literally that in my very first game.
That's awesome, though. That's kind of like how creepers in Minecraft were invented. Well, I don't know if invented is the right word, but it was a bug that then became a feature. That's awesome. Sure. So speaking of, before we move away from early Bethesda days, are you familiar with a game called The 10th Planet?
Yes.
Did you work on The 10th Planet?
Well, I don't think, it wasn't a game, was it?
It never came out, no.
Okay. It's not a game in the sense that it's a thing.
Right, yeah. It was an idea. A lot of people are thinking it might have been like Bethesda's first attempt at a space RPG, which is what they're currently doing now. Right. So I'm sure that I'm going to get people asking me in the comments, why didn't I ask you at least one question about the 10th Planet?
No, I'm happy to dish.
So is the 10th Planet, was that something that Bethesda really, really wanted to make happen? Because I've read some interviews from people that they almost pushed it to the point to where they were considering like risking bankruptcy almost because of how large this game was going to be. Is that all true?
Well, so I'll tell you what I know.
Okay.
With the involvement of Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin was, right?
Yes, I've read, yeah.
So they were the guys who, at the time that we got involved with them, had done a movie whose first name escapes me. It's like Moon 7 or something like that. And then they had done Oh, what's their famous movie? Their first famous movie. The
Why am I drawing a blank too?
Star. It was a Star something, right?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
definitely.
but it was the one that was made into a TV series.
And I think what would influence them to try to do the 10th Planet, correct? They wanted to kind of bring that sci-fi coolness, as they called it, into the gaming universe, kind of.
Right. So it was the movie, and are you looking it up? And you'll let me know in a second what it's called.
Yes.
Let's see. It was a movie where, if you haven't seen it, these people discover this sort of dimensional portal that sends them off to, I guess another dimension, maybe another planet, and it's revealed that the Egyptians were aliens, and drama unfolds from there. And so we had talked to them, and at the time they were working on Independence Day, which was their next one. And we didn't know. I mean, that was also worlds ahead of what they had done, previously. But they,
it's Stargate, by the way. It's Stargate.
I was like, it's a portal, because I was like, portal, star, door?
Star something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Stargate. So they, we talked to them for, I mean, it seems like a long time, maybe 6 months. And they got to the stage where they were sending us, basically, I think the idea was that they were doing a lot with Stargate, because Stargate was, the Egyptians were the original aliens, and now it was the Aztecs were the original aliens. So it was really not that much of a pivot.
It's ancient aliens,
Yeah, and pyramid making aliens. Like, it was just a part where, like, instead of spaceships, it looked like giant onks. It was spaceships that looked like some Aztec symbol.
Right.
So, and then the monsters had kind of a similar vibe. But we were hyped on it, and we recognized that they were kind of a growing group that would be helpful to tap creatively, and maybe a movie would be made out of it, and we would get co-credit on it, and and everything. So I think that basically, from my perspective, because I was again on the development side, so I was waiting on sketches and design descriptions and things that said, like, all right, well, we would get facts to us, here's a spaceship, and be like, okay, cool, is this a spaceship that is very powerful? What are its weapons? How does it attack? Like all the questions of, like, how is this actually being used in the game? And it would take a long time to come back, and then a long time to say, okay, well, we don't know, do whatever you want. And it just gradually petered out into a thing that I think that there was maybe one or two, this is before E3, so CESs that we advertised the 10th Planet as being, coming through soon from Bethesda. The 10th Planet is obviously, this was actually there. How many planets are there in the solar system now? Like
9 or 8 or so, yeah.
I think there were 9 in the early 90s, but then Pluto.
Oh, because Pluto, yes.
So the 10th planet, we'd have to get 2 more planets for us to have 10.
So you have to find.
At the time, we only got 1 more planet.
You'd have to make something even smaller and farther away a planet now, just so you can do it. Was it supposed to be essentially like an Elder Scrolls game, but in space? Because looking at some of the old footage and stuff, it doesn't actually show, like, it shows maybe like some old footage from a spacecraft flying around and shooting lasers, but it didn't show any on foot stuff. Was it supposed to be all in ship, or was it kind of a blend?
I think it was a blend. I mean, I think that there was a part where and we always wanted to have, obviously, if you're going to do that, you're going to need to have at least some space combat and some other things going on there. But I don't think it ever got to the stage where we got deep enough into the design to really fully grasp what this thing was supposed to be.
It seemed pretty ambitious. I mean, from what I read, it was supposed to be, I guess now, what you told me, combined, on foot and ship flying around, but at the same time, all the orbital bodies, all the planets are supposed to follow a realistic orbital pattern, and you have to manage resources to defend against an alien invasion. It sounds like something that was way ahead of its time personally. And
Yeah, yeah. No,
oh,
no,
you,
it would have been a good game, and we were very excited about it. But you know, I was talking to someone about this and saying like I can't remember. Let's say I've done like 25 games or whatever, and then I go I think probably for every game that I've done, I've at least one game I've worked on has not come to light, and that's probably a really good percentage. But
yeah.
it might be every 2 games, but that's a little, okay, well that seems sad, but it is what it is.
I think that's just how it is with almost any passion like industry you're in. You have to, not everything comes to light. Even with painting, sometimes you throw the painting
Sure.
away. But you've definitely had a good track record, I would say. Before we move on from the old, and I want to talk about the Wayward Realms and OnceLost Games, I want to ask you one final question. You've given a lot of the people a lot of great memories in the Elder Scrolls universe, from Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, and Oblivion. What are some of your favorite memories from any game that you've worked on? Really, I guess it doesn't have to be the Elder Scrolls, but just in the gaming industry in general.
As something that when I was playing the game, or just in the industry is.
Let's go with both. I was asking in terms of like a developer, but let's
Right.
go with both. Why not? It sounds like a good
Yeah,
idea.
well, I mean, the one, and this isn't maybe my favorite game of all time, but those might be up there. I will always remember, as a gamer, playing the Salmon Max game. Salmon Max Hit the Road, and I was playing with my roommate, and she was not a big gamer, but we got to the stage where you're supposed to be rescuing, and I'm trying to remember which is Salmon, which is Max, but the rabbit who is kind of hovering on a cage over a fire or something. And we'd been playing for a long time, and we finally had to go out to dinner. And we were sitting there eating dinner, and then after a while, like the conversation went down, and we said, I really think we need to go back and save him. Like neither one of us could eat, because we're just like, I need to go. Like what are we doing eating when that poor rabbit is hanging over a fire? So that's when you kind of go like, okay, well this silly technology actually can have some emotional impact, even in a particularly funny silly game. So that was the first thing that come to mind when you're just talking about sort of memories of that. I'm trying to think of particular memories of other games that I've worked on. The one that this always makes me think of the industry as a whole, and kind of the globalization of development on it. We were working on a Scooby-Doo game. This was like 12 years after Bethesda and I'd moved to California. And I think our publisher was Universal, or whoever had the Scooby-Doo rights. And we got to the end of the project, and we had created all the levels, and and been working on all of that. And then we got to the part where, because I had written a script that like, this is the mystery that's being solved, and this is, and it actually was a funny enough, it was a procedurally generated thing where like you could play multiple times, and there'd be a different person who was responsible, and things would mix up based on that. And we said, okay, well, when are you going to deliver the finished cutscenes for all of these scripts that Ted had written? And they said, well, when are you going to finish them? And then we looked at our contract and realized, oh, we're supposed to produce those. And it was at the very end of the project. We had kind of spent all the money, and so we said, okay, well, we need to get somebody to do this, and we just went, find whoever can do it for $1.75, and we found a company in China that did them, and did them spectacularly, and like found interesting camera angles, and did the graphics and everything like that, just amazing. And we then said, oh my God, thank God our bacon is saved. And then we went, oh, they can do a lot of this stuff so much faster and better and cheaper in China than in here. And long term, this is going to be a problem.
So you kind of like had a solution and discovered another problem at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow. At least it kind of worked out for your
We're
end.
not that.
So that's
Yeah.
good. Wow. So that's interesting. You know, that Scooby-Doo game does sound like it's fun, even though it's old. I may have to pick it up just to see.
I'll just give you an idea. I think we made it for the PSP.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I may have a PSP laying around
I was
somewhere.
going to say dust it off.
I need to give it some TLC and pick it back up again. So that's quite the adventure. You went from, being like, a fan of games and Dungeons and Dragons to making literally the virtual version of Dungeons and Dragons, and then working on Scooby-Doo and Terminator, and now here you are at OnceLost Games as a design director working on. Well, I'll let you explain. I want to ask what your explanation, what your views are for Wayward Realms. Is it the Wayward Realms or is it Wayward Realms, first of all?
That's a good question. I think I usually just call it Wayward Realms,
Okay.
but the Wayward Realms is probably the full real title that we're going with, and I can circle back on sort of how we came up with that title, but it all began with Indigo Gaming, who I know doing an interview with Julian where it was kind of a retrospective over the Elder Scrolls, and then that got me. I hadn't talked to Julian in a couple of years. I mean, we'd seen each other. I mean, we worked together, on the Elder Scrolls 30 years ago, and so then we started chatting, and we kind of said that like if we had done things differently on Daggerfall, this is how we would have wanted them to go, and it really just seemed like, it's a passion project in the right sense of the word. That it's it's the one where you go like, okay, well it's almost like getting married again to the same person, where you go like, all right, we know these are the things that were right, and these are the things that went wrong, and we want to sort of address those and do them better. So I think the simplistic way of calling it is like it's a spiritual successor to Daggerfall, in the sense that if you like Daggerfall, and you when we created it, we said, okay, well these are the things that define Daggerfall. Like a gigantic world, a really robust character creation system, the ability to create your own spells and items and enchant objects, and a factional system that goes across this wide area, a lot of non-linearity of plot line, a lot of those things we just kind of like put the pins in those and said, we can't make a spiritual successor to Daggerfall without hitting one of the all of these pins, and then from there going like, but what did we wish we had done differently and better in that? And Julian, in the meantime, had done a lot of work on a lot of these ideas, and just kind of been doing some programming on the side on kind of discrete systems that would support some of these things. So, for example, in the whole world, I can't remember how many NPCs there were in Daggerfall. Somebody counted them all, but let's just say there were 50,000 or whatever NPCs, but they were all procedurally generated, and they were all like, it's X the blacksmith, and he's going to tell you this, and we did have a reputation system and some other aspects on that, but in this, X the blacksmith was actually created before you started playing the game, because he is part of this family, and he has this cousin, and he has these part, and his last name, you can figure out who he's connected to with all of these, with kind of this whole system, and that's how the world is populated, with sort of a series of families, and that just it's a great way to kind of create a world in which everyone has meaning to one another, which I think is one of the ways to make it kind of a living, breathing world.
That's awesome, because that's definitely an important thing to give the world some kind of palpability is for the people to actually feel like they would feel in this world. If everyone just seems to be a randomly planted character with no correlation to someone else, then it just kind of feels hollow. So I'm glad that that's one of the boxes that you're going to check for Wayward Realms. And that's one of the questions I was going to ask is what specific things from, like, let's say Daggerfall where you actually want to pay more attention to for Wayward Realms. And I want to ask in regards to the procedural generation, how much of this procedural generation is going to be in Wayward? Are you going to use those familiar kind of systems? Obviously, they're more modernized now, but within Wayward as well, kind of like how you did with Daggerfall, or are you going to go for like a blend of some handcrafted areas, totally crafted, and then also procedural generation on top of that? What's your plan?
Well, even in Daggerfall, we did have some things that were handcrafted. So like the major dungeons in Daggerfall, at least some of them, maybe not all of them, were handcrafted. So it really is just kind of ratcheting it up. So there will definitely be handcrafted elements, and we kind of begin with the handcrafted elements and then break it down so that we can say, all right, well, this is what a fishing village should look like when it's all put together. And that's not only the the physical nature of it, to say like, all right, well, there's a river and there's a wharf and there's a stockhouse and there's a nasty little tavern and whatever other things kind of fit into that category. But you say, well, it's obviously these certain factions are more likely to be around in there, and this is a good place to go for buried treasure, and there might be more piracy going on over here. So you kind of start with the if you're talking about painting, it's almost like you start with the painting and then you smash it to pieces and then figure out what all of these little pieces are, put it all together and say, okay, well, no, what if we kind of did it in a different way? So we began with tons and tons of lists of different types of environments. Like I said, could be a fishing village, could be a mountain monastery, or whatever type of sort of big picture environments, and then creating environments around that. So we have and then we do we'll do concept art to start off with, and then start pulling it out in 3D, and then like I said, breaking it down.
Okay, that makes sense. So, in regards to Daggerfall, again, one thing I really liked about Daggerfall was that almost it seemed like on every playthrough, or from one person's playthrough to another, it had some pretty big differences. Like there's things in the game that were not almost meant to be discovered on your first playthrough, if at all. I believe it's been a while, so forgive me, but I believe it was the Daedra summoning, for instance, was like a kind of a hidden Easter egg, and some other things. And I personally love that. I love there being these things that, like, even a year after the game comes out, someone's like, hey, I discovered, like, if you move this rock at this cave, there's a hidden place. Are you going to have any kind of, like, hidden gameplay elements or Easter eggs and Dagger Wayward? For sure. Okay, excellent.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I would even, I mean, it's funny when you mentioned that, because people will talk about like, oh, are there any like Easter eggs in Daggerfall? And I'm going, if you read the manual, there's nothing there about becoming a vampire or becoming a werewolf, or so many aspects that people just say like, okay, well this was in the game, like, but that we didn't tell you it was in the game. And you just had to play it, and then word gets out, that, oh, okay, well, there's some chance if you get scratched by a werewolf, these things will happen with you, and you're going to have to deal with it, because we're not going to, we're not going to tell you, okay, you can turn into a werewolf. It's going to be as scary as if you get, if in real life you turned into a werewolf and you were like, what is happening to me? And I've got to kill people. I don't think I probably should, but, this is, that's the body horror aspect of things like that. So
I think that adds so much to the game world. It actually gives you like an experience more so than you're just going through the environment and doing quest A, quest B, quest C. Like when you actually have some undiscovered thing that you're like, wait a second, what is this? And you look it up and you can't find anything. I think that adds so much.
And that was also the days. I mean, there were bulletin boards online at the time of Arena and Daggerfall, but there wasn't, the kind of the worldwide web, as we know it to get today. So word still spread, even in that early days of the internet, of like, all right, I'm fighting through this dungeon, I'm running into the wall on, in Arena, we were big into riddles. And I don't know what the answer to this riddle is. And someone would come online and talk about it. And it is, in a way, free advertising, because as soon as you make it to a thing where the community needs to start chatting about this, then you go like, okay, well, this is a game that I might want to check out.
Okay, that's true. Definitely free advertising, especially now with like how viral status is of stuff like those
sure.
kind of things would definitely take off. You mentioned, back kind of on the free advertising topic. This is one thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and this seems like a good spot. When people compare Wayward Realms to the Elder Scrolls franchise, does that bother you at all, or do you think that is a somewhat valid comparison, if as long as they keep in mind Daggerfall and Arena and Morrowind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would put it the way you did it, that, and this really isn't a criticism against the later Elder Scrolls games. I've had diminishing involvement in the Elder Scrolls games from probably the most in Daggerfall, a good amount in Morrowind, a little bit in Oblivion, and then nothing at all in Skyrim. And so the direction that they've decided to take things obviously has been successful for them. They've won lots of awards, made lots of money, and that's fine. But if you are someone who's played a number of them, you'll see the trend that going like, okay, we're simplifying the the skill systems, and we're shrinking down the amount of area that you have to play in. We're cutting back the kind of the amount of lore and books you can read, and the complexity of that. And some people call it dumbing it down, which again, Bethesda will cry their way to the bank for that insult. But there is a part where I think that it is simplifying it in a lot of ways. And you will read reviews or things about Skyrim where they'll talk about how humongous the world is and how you can do anything, and you go like, you really don't know what you've missed. Like there's a whole lot more that could be done that isn't being done on that. And so I think that's kind of been our diving off board, where you go like, it's fine. I mean, we started the Elder Scrolls series. We're the worst of the Elder Scrolls game is still a pretty good game, but we think that it could have gone in a different direction, and that's sort of been our goal. So it's not a thing where it's really a criticism of that, but a thing where we go like, well, let's just take it in a different direction and see if people like it.
So that kind of simplification for a more broad, casual RPG audience is something that you're going to try to avoid with Wayward Realms for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. That's good to hear, because I believe that kind of style of RPG, there's definitely a gap for it in the community right now, and if you guys can actually pull that off, I would definitely hype for that. Let's touch on the setting a little bit. Do you have kind of like a brief explanation of what the setting of the game world will be? If you can give like people maybe kind of a little gist as to what they could expect.
Sure. Well, the setting of the world is a place called the Archipelago. It is thus the name, it's a series of islands. When you begin the game, and how do I put this? When you begin the game and when you really begin the game, so you kind of created the game, created your character, you go through the first dungeon. When you emerge, the world is going to be different than the way it was when you entered the dungeon. And the choices that you made in the dungeon have a lot to do with that. So the world is, from your point of view when you begin the game, non-magical and not at all. I mean, it's basically like feels like a piece of the past, that you're in kind of a medieval environment. You're actually on a very small island, a very small remote island off the archipelago. And you actually haven't heard from the major kingdoms of the archipelago in a while, and things happen. I don't want to. I'm always careful not to do too many spoilers, but you go through this adventure, and when you emerge from that first dungeon, the world magic has returned to the world, and not only magic but the monsters and kind of the demi-humans and everything else, and you've really influenced what the world is like. So there are human kingdoms and orcish kingdoms and elvish baronies, and all of that stuff is sort of located throughout this sandbox environment.
That sounds awesome. Ooh, I'm already getting hyped. And you mentioned elves and orcs. Do you have kind of a number in mind for how many playable races there will be, like what the character can play as? Uh,
I do. I don't know if I want to give it away.
Okay, I understand. Totally understand. In regards to the main character, you probably can't give too much away either, but like let's bring up some Elder Scrolls games. Like in Skyrim, the main character, or almost every Elder Scrolls game, you're kind of like the living legend from an actual Elder Scrolls, carrying out what was foretold in one of the scrolls. Is your character in Wayward Realms kind of a legendary person in this way, or are they someone who's just kind of normal and that just falls into things depending on what you do?
Well, somewhere in between that. So I don't really like the chosen one trope.
Hmm.
It's also I think it steps on the foot of role playing. One of the things that we've really been excited about, especially watching YouTube videos and some of the things that have been with Daggerfall Unity project, that you can see people really playing with the toy and really investigating the role playing aspects and saying, what what are the limits of this? What is the craziest type of character that I could create and legitimately have a good time playing, that the game will support me in my lunatic combination of skills and character concept. And it's just been really inspirational to say, like, okay, well, that's the type of game that we want to make, is a game where I when I play a role playing game, cynically, I usually start off as playing a warrior, because I go, well, they probably have got some sword play and that stuff fine. And especially if it's a Dungeons and Dragons game, base game, then they're going to say, well, the wizard character is not going to have very many hit points. And I'm like, I don't want to die before I figured out how to play this game. So I'm gonna play this the toughest type of character and play through that. So what's really been great about watching these videos is seeing these great ideas that people have managed to come up with, and I think that gets in that giving people the freedom to do that gets in the way of this concept of you are the chosen one and you need to defeat the dragon. And go like, well, what if I love dragons? And, you can solve a mean story, but not a story where you have to fulfill a destiny.
I understand. I think I prefer that as well. So let's say, like you said, you can kill the dragon, you can befriend the dragon. Are you going to try to have open-ended options like this for quests and dialogue in the game, or are you going to, at one point in time, have to try to narrow the player down to a certain canon for the main story?
I don't think we're ever going to have to really narrow them down. I mean, the story is going to progress. It's got I don't want to give too much stuff away.
I understand.
But the quests are definitely created to be very nonlinear and very open-ended, in the sense that let's say that you almost walk into a situation, just as an individual quest, you walk into a situation more than a like a traditional quest where you go to the king and he says, I need you to kill this werewolf, like we said, for Dungeon X for Y amount of gold, and need to be back in Z time, or the blades are going to go and get you. That first of all, you begin with, well, we're kind of creating a lot of them using kind of a 5-act structure, which is kind of the classical Shakespearean way of doing it. So you begin with the first act, which is the situation at hand. So let's just say that as simple as this is it's a kill the werewolf quest. So you go into this town and on moonlit nights, they've been finding dead bodies, and that you get that information by going around. You haven't gotten the quest yet, but you know what the situation is, so you can approach it different ways. You can say, okay, well, I know that the Baron runs this town. I know that this NPC, her husband was one of the people who died. You investigate at the early stages. So that's kind of the end of Act 1, and then you end up getting the quest where we saying, okay, well, we'll figure it out. And at that stage, you don't know it's a werewolf. But later on, you go to the Baron and he says, it's we think it's a werewolf. At any one of these stages, we can start shifting things around, and again, it's based on the player's action. So if the player, let's say the player is a werewolf himself, and going like, okay, well, something about this situation, and maybe the Baron is covering something up, and maybe some cults that are about wolf worship, and all of these are different sort of pathways that end up being open to you based on a real simple premise that kind of octopuses out into other options.
That sounds pretty intriguing. Now that reminds me of something I've read about Wayward Realms before. I don't know if this is something you can touch on at all, but the virtual dungeon master that kind of picks up on the different choices the character makes. So if they're more like less combat oriented, the virtual dungeon master can maybe push some more less combat quests their way. Is that something that you guys are going to try to actually make?
That's a huge part of Wayward Realms, and it's kind of always been our thing that we would want. It goes back to how we play pen and paper role-playing games, and that you can create this great campaign, and okay, well, this is the dungeon you're going to end up going into, but if the people immediately go into the tavern and you discover that they aren't into it, or like don't really enjoy this, so you go like, okay, well, as a good dungeon master, I can adjust the world around it. So yeah, that's kind of what we call the VG. I'm the virtual dungeon master, or virtual game master.
That sounds super cool. I'm kind of interested to see how that progresses as your development process goes, because I don't know if I can. I mean, other than like maybe like AI Dungeon Master or little programs like that, I can't think of a game that maybe does it to the extent that you guys would like to do it with Wayward. And I think that's totally something people should pay special attention to be hyped for this game, for sure.
Yeah, and probably when you talk about the differences between that and the Elder Scrolls, there's a part where they would talk about what do they call the AI in the Elder Scrolls? The
Radiant AI, I believe.
Radiant AI. I've heard people kind of refer to it as a kind of a Radiant game master. I'm like, well, the Elder Scrolls keeps the Radiant term on that, but yeah, it is something that's supposed to evolve and pay attention to what you do, and that shouldn't be a hard thing, for an AI to do, is to say, these are the things that, I mean, let's just, on the simplest point of view, if you're someone who is constantly collecting books as they're playing through the game, just having the game master say, your reward for this quest should probably be this really rare book that you've been looking for. And even on that level, where you just say, like, I've been paying attention to what you like from this, and I'm going to reward you appropriately and not give you the sword of damnation if you've never used a sword before.
Now I love that, because one thing that kind of like annoys me in RPG games is if I level up to go to this big dungeon fort, whatever it happens to be, that was higher level than me, and I fight my way through it, and all at the end I beat the big boss and the chest opens up and I'm, let's say, like a magic user who wears robes, and it gives me like a two-handed sword and a piece of heavy armor. Right, I'm like, sure. What am I supposed to do with this? Sell it? Yep. Like, I don't need money.
Well, yeah, game. Yeah. So, but I think that there's a part where like almost any way of progressing through a role-playing game, there is the big goal, and but in a lot of cases, it's the most emotional big goal if it's something that you've sort of gathered up for yourself, that this is what really matters to me, and this is what I need to complete my collection of these books or whatever, and going like, okay, well, now this book, which this character may not care about, becomes the world to a different character.
Oh, virtual dungeon master is gonna love my collection freak that I am. I collect everything in the games. So I got a few more questions before we wrap things up.
Yeah.
Some of the people in the comments, a lot of people were asking about the graphic style. Are you gonna try to go for a more realistic tone, maybe something more retro, maybe something more like soft, cell shaded, if that's the terminology? Can you speak on that at all?
I think that the closest way that we've come to describe it is it's neither super stylized nor super realistic. So we call it, stylized realism or epic realism, or it's not going to, you don't want to have that uncanny valley of something that this year looks super photorealistic, and in 5 years' time it looks dated as hell. So we're kind of riding that line.
Okay. So maybe like a combination of, let's say, the Elder Scrolls with maybe like, I don't know if you're familiar with Fable, how they're more of a like a stylized. Okay,
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say.
that sounds like that could be good. And then also I want to ask you about the combat. We talked about how some of the things in the Elder Scrolls is grown stale over the years. In my
Yeah.
opinion, the combat is still kind of that same combat it's always been. It was good back then, but now it just feels like it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
What kind of combat style are you going to go for with Wayward Realms? If you can maybe compare it to a noteworthy RPG game, is it going to be like hack and slash? Is it going to be more of a mix of numbers? And
Well, yeah. So I never like the, and this is the thing we did in the Elder Scrolls, and this is a good example of something that I think we could do better. So if you have a sword skill, I think in Arena and probably in Daggerfall as well, that your chance of hitting was based on your skill. So whether you slash, left or right or up and down or whatever, it didn't matter. It would just like roll the dice and say, all right, we've got a 10% longsword skill, and so you have a 10% chance of hitting at any time. And it's always tricky on those type of things as a gamer and a game designer to ride the difference between player skill and character skill. I mean, that's always kind of the tricky thing about role-playing games. So there have been a couple games that have done in recent years that have kind of done a decent job in terms of riding that line and pushing it forward. I mean, I think that we come back to a lot of games like the Witcher series have certainly done a good job with combat in most cases. Ours is going to be first person perspective, so it's going to be a little different on that. But even from the beginning, one of the things that we've been talking about is even the starting weapon, which and traditionally would be like a dagger or a short sword or something like that. And I'm trying to think if I'm allowed to talk about this.
oh yeah, I don't want to cause any trouble.
Well, let's just say we're not doing that. We're doing one of the things that I really like is having weapons having multiple uses and multiple reasons to come back to them. So that in a lot of these games, I start off with an iron dagger, and after a while, I have enough gold, or I've discovered the golden scimitar or whatever that's much better, and you just throw your iron dagger away. So having weapons that have multiple uses and multiple functionalities has kind of been a big goal, is to making it so that you're not just moving on a hierarchy of weapon skills. Another thing that we're doing as far as combat goes, and this really goes for all skill progression, is really making it into a thing where, especially at a certain point, you need to seek, you reach a certain natural level, and you can go beyond that, but that's a question in and of itself, to be able to find a master or a trainer or somebody who can kind of push these things to the next level. So that's not just for combat, but that'll be for magic and thieving skills and language skills and everything else. So
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. That's pretty cool. So So, for instance, you're like saying like let's say a mace would be good for maybe people in heavy armor, or like there's weaknesses and bonuses for certain things. Okay, I like that. How about magic? Is magic going to be, what could magic be comparable in terms of RPGs? If you
Uh,
can talk about it.
I probably can. I mean, honestly, I really, really want to.
Okay.
Uh, and I've tried to think of a way to talk about it without giving anything away. I mean, a whole lot of the beginning of the world, like I said, is you being in a non-magical world. So you don't really, at the beginning, have. I mean, I hate to say it, but you're like Harry Potter, that you're kind of coming out of a world that you think is this totally normal world, and then you come into to this other world. So I feel like during the course of development, we're gonna have to talk about it. But I'm trying to figure out a way to talk about it without kind of ruining it, and I haven't quite landed on it yet.
I understand. From that
But
perspective,
I'll just say I've thought about it a lot.
okay.
So
That is
I'll
good.
say that it's not that I can't talk about it because I don't know. It's because I don't. I think it's going to be really, really cool.
Yeah, you want to tailor the experience for the player. I totally understand. I think that being someone who thinks that the world is more normal and then being introduced into the grand magical scheme of things is also great from an immersion purpose, from like the eyes of the player, because then as you experience the world for the first time from the player, you kind of are doing the same thing in the game world as well.
Well, the other tricky thing about even designing magic systems is, sorry,
Oh, you're fine.
is it's like combat. So you're writing a line and you're trying to create something that a player can grasp, a player can figure out like ways to trick the system and play with it, but you never want it to be so mundane that it loses the reason why it's called magic. That there really is a difference between, like, say, lock picking as a skill and some type of magic that you really could figure out the science behind lock picking.
Yeah, yeah.
Magic should always be a thing that's debated, and we know this is a thing, but we're not quite sure why. And these people think this, and these people think this, and these people think it's all evil, and these people, think it's a sign from the gods, and it should be magic. Big.
So magic's going to be more than just a skill. It's actually going to be like a grand, mysterious thing, like you would imagine magic to be. It will be magical, I guess, is the right term.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Cool. All right.
Otherwise, it's just like I have a rocket launcher. Like
right.
Fireball and a rocket launcher is the same thing. If there's no big mystery behind the rocket launcher.
Totally understandable. I got just a couple community questions I do want to ask you real quick before I get to the closing thoughts. Sleep Agent over on YouTube, she wanted to know at this point in time, is there going to be any plans for romance or family options or stuff like that?
The truth is, at this time, no. Really, because I think it's a big. It's a big. It's a motivator. It's an important subject that I haven't seen many games do right, and I don't feel like I want to tackle it and not do it right. So it's not like if it's just a question of like having sex with somebody or whatever.
Right.
Okay. Well, even that, you're like, well, what is the point of? Why is that more fun in the game than it is in real life? Well, it shouldn't be. But
right.
but there's a part where okay, well, I guess if the idea is forging close relationships is definitely going to be in the game. Getting to the stage where you are getting married, procreating, stuff like that. That may be down the line. That might be if we have time and we can do it well, then we'll put it. I'm not against it. I just don't know. There's just a whole lot of things we have to figure out.
You just don't want to be like a tacked on thing just for the heck of it, basically. You want to actually have some tangibility. I understand. Some of these community questions we kind of touched on already. Oh, I hate saying some of these. Excuse me if I butcher your name. Afridi Hassan over on Twitter. He wanted to know if there's any direct inspiration from any books or games for Wayward Realms. I mean, obviously Daggerfall would be the main
Yeah.
one, but is there any kind of like maybe fantasy universe that comes to mind when you think of Wayward Realms at this point in time?
There are some that I probably can't say.
Okay.
Because it would probably give some stuff away. I mean, I think that we do, as far as like I mentioned, as far as some gameplay things that looking at more recent role playing games, we have mentioned, and I think that this is a thing that has come up more recently, that even though we think of it as being an inspiration from Daggerfall, that a lot of sort of the Game of Thrones world has we had a lot of different factions and intrigue and stuff like that in Daggerfall. The Game of Thrones TV series and the books have cranked a lot of that up, and I think we're kind of leapfrogging on some of that as well.
So like the faction political intrigue and like this royal family against another one, and how the player can kind of fit in and benefit from that situation. Okay, I think that would be cool as well.
That's a huge part of what the world is like.
That sounds awesome. Now that's going to be cool. I can't wait to see what kind of trouble I can cause for these royals. So, if you can talk about some of this, that would be great. But if not, I totally understand. But kind of the closing thoughts, I wanted to talk about the current status of OnceLost Games and Wayward Realms. The main thing you guys are looking for, or waiting for now, is a publisher. If you guys get a publisher that would really kickstart things into like full development mode, I just want to put a hypothetical out there. Let's say you guys got a publisher signed and everything's ready to go by the end of, like, let's say next week. What would change over the course of the next couple of weeks in terms of OnceLost and the Wayward Realms development? Would you be able to immediately just jump into like hiring mode and exactly all the pinpoints and things?
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably, because all of us have been working on this in our copious spare time, we've got reams of concept art and world building documents and things like that, which have been kind of a luxury to be able to have. I mean, we pretty much had to leap into, for example, Daggerfall, and then in between working on other gameplay things, saying like, okay, well, I guess I better work on some books for this world, or some backstory on these things. So we've had the luxury of being able to do that, because we've been, again, doing it in our free time and relying on, we've got a couple dozen people, mostly off the Discord channel, who have also been doing work in their free time. And actually, if I could throw out a little thing, we could use a couple more of them with some specific skill sets. So at this point, it's a voluntary passion project thing, but we anticipate it being a thing where once we get financing, that we're able to really start implementing. We have been implementing these things, but there's a big difference between when you are working on a thing for less than 40 hours a week, and when you're actually making a game, which tends to mean you're doing 80 hours a week, and everybody else is, and everyone has you because you're paying people, they kind of have to do it,
right? It's a big motivator.
Yeah, well, and Bethesda paid crap, so the money was not a huge motivator, but it was enough of a thing where you go like, okay, well, yeah, we're these are the things I need to do, and it's not that I'm going to work on the things that I want to do. So you kind of have to divvy out things where you don't want to give everyone like the crappy, okay, we need to have someone design a horse. Well, nobody wants to create a horse, but okay, well, somebody needs to.
Someone needs to make this horse.
Yeah, no, there needs to be a horse, and if you're being paid for it, so you're gonna have to create it. Sorry.
So in terms of like kind of skill sets, what kind of skill sets do you need right now, and how can they actually get a hold of you if they want to, I guess, apply or express interest in doing some of this stuff?
So the two big ones that we primarily need are people with background in as coding in Unreal. So just kind of a pure journalist coder. I mean, there are specific elements that I mean, Julian is the technical director, and he's the one who's probably able to speak more about like these are the areas that we're looking for. But I can't imagine if you have experience in coding for Unreal and you're willing to give us, a couple hours a week, that we're not going to find some fit for you. And the other thing is in animation. So we do have we're very well set on concept artists, and we've got some amazing 2D concept artists who can still do things like textures and there's a lot of other elements that go into that. And we've got some 3D artists. We can always use a few more of those. I think it's probably impossible in a procedurally generated world to have too many 3D artists to create. Again, some of these will be the mundane: create a tree, create another tree, create another tree. So
we need a different rock.
There's a lot of trees and there's a lot of rocks, and so like some of the things are going to be super exciting, like create an ogre and animate them and stuff like that. And those are like the spectacular parts. But yeah, there's a whole lot of the world that needs to be created on that. So really, the Unreal coder, the animator, and 3D artists would be fantastic. We've got some writers and volunteer designers who are also working on it. Since I'm the one who's been kind of bringing those people on, I love the guys that we have on. If you have a knack for this, then we can definitely talk. But those are the real big needed ones. So our I think it's info@waywardrealms.com is what we're using to kind of begin these conversations. And you're going to need to do a non-disclosure agreement, and because we can't really talk to you about some of the stuff about the project if you're going to be shouting things off. I think you got to be 18. We actually had someone who was younger who signed on at one point and didn't think to ask. So I'm being a little bit smarter. So and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll put that up on screen for you guys. You've probably already seen it already. And then I'll go ahead and put in the description for anyone interested in applying or helping out. And then I'll also put in the description a link for the Discord. So anyone that just wants to, go here, they're really awesome. They listen to the community. It's probably one of the best developer and community relationships I've seen. And I've covered a lot of games and stuff. And they also have the Ledger of Ideas, I believe it is, over on Discord, where you too can actually go there and give them some of your ideas, and they respond back, and they're really open to hearing what they want from the community from this game. And I gotta tell you, I am super hyped for this game. I am definitely looking forward to it. I'll be covering it a lot on the channel here, and I hope that we can grow this community to be as big as it deserves, because this game is definitely got my attention. Hopefully it has your guys' attention as well. And Ted, thank you so much for doing this interview. Hopefully it can help raise some more awareness for Wayward Realms, and it's just fun getting to talk to someone that had like their hand in creating so many worlds that I've loved to play in. Any closing or final statements you'd like to say about OnceLost or Wayward Realms? Anything maybe we didn't cover in this interview that you'd like to end things with?
Well, it's since you mentioned the community at the end of this, I mean, one of the reasons, so the name of our Discord channel is the Council of Wisdom, and the reason why it's called that is that when we were developing the Elder Scrolls games, and again, this is certainly pre-web, but there were bulletin boards, and we brought on some people who we ended up calling the Council of Wisdom. So they were our combination of beta testers, people that we'd bounce ideas off of, really kind of confidants, and they ended up creating a lot of the lore. So a lot of things that I think you could probably find even now in Skyrim were original texts written by them in 1992 or 93 or whenever we were doing that. So we really, the idea of involving the community and like I said, not only having them help out with development, but really being people that we bounce ideas off of as been our philosophy for 30 years. So we're excited that something like Discord allows us to kind of bring that back.
Awesome. No, that's great. That's something that's definitely lacking right now in the gaming industry. It seems like a lot of big companies, I don't want to name names, but they just kind of are like the big faceless giant that checks all the social media points on all their posts, and beyond that, unless they make a big mistake, you're not going to get much of a direct response from them. So that's awesome. Hopefully this blows up because you guys definitely deserve it. I know it's probably going to be a while, everyone, so don't expect anything immediately. But if you guys want to help out, you can go to the Discord, go to the Council of Wisdom, and I'm over there as well. So thank you, Ted. Super appreciate it. Definitely looking forward to the game for sure. And
all right, this again.
Yep, and this is it, everyone. Thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time, and like I said, those links are down in the description below. Make sure you go to Discord and you send them your support. And as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when Ted Peterson was actually the true Sheregorath all along, which is another story that we didn't get into in this one. Is cheese for everyone? Is it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Ted. See you next time.